Superiority, originally by Arthur C. Clarke. At this moment, I'm standing in the dock of the International Court facing the judge. I started the presentation. Your Honor, as the Commander-in-Chief of Starfleet at the later period of war, I am responsible for the loss of the war. But I want to refute some false reports. I have an obligation to explain the war to the public. The court will know why I'm requesting solitary confinement. The only reason we lost the war was our science is better than the enemy's. I'll repeat it again. The enemy's scientific inferiority led to our defeat. Then, in our narrative, the darkness of that failed war comes to the forefront. At the beginning of the war, our main weapons were the long-range guided torpedo, dirigible ball lightning, and the various modifications of the Clyden beam. Although the enemy also has these weapons, but the power of their weapons were far less than ours. In addition, our military research centers are much larger than those of the enemy. At first we had the upper hand, but the enemy was more resilient than we had expected. For the next step of the strategy, the commander, Admiral Taxaris, called a meeting. Professor Norden attended the conference for the first time. He is the newly appointed leader of the Military Research Center. General Tucker asks if the group can improve existing weapons to extend the current military advantage. Norden's answer was surprising. He told everyone, weapons have not made any essential changes in nearly 100 years. People unknowingly turn into dying conservatism. Although the enemy is not much more clever than us, before long, the enemy will become militarily superior. That's why we need new and never-before-seen weapons. Norden has ordered his men to start researching some completely new areas. He believes this will make a real difference in the military situation. A month later, Norden announced the birth of the Sphere of Annihilation. This weapon can turn matter within a radius of several hundred meters into nothing. Everyone reveled in the unparalleled power of the new weapon, but did not notice that it has a fatal weakness. The Sphere of Annihilation plays a devastating role on a spherical scale. After the explosion, the internal starting device will be destroyed. Therefore, it could not use a manned spacecraft to launch. Only controlled missiles can be used. It would necessitate a separate design of the missile to enable it to carry the new weapons. It involves using a larger tonnage ship. We took this option and suspended all military attacks. 6 months later, our large crafts were all loaded with the Sphere of Annihilation. Then something happened. In the training flight, one of our main warships suddenly disappeared without a trace. The survey results show that long-range radar activation triggers the Sphere of Annihilation as soon as the ship fires its missiles. This is how the main ship was self-destructed. To eliminate this flaw, the scheduled campaign was postponed for another month. We had to redeploy the ship project. Just as our military operations were halted, the enemy dealt us a sudden blow. There is not even one automatic missile on our ship at this time. We had to retreat temporarily and lost 3 planets. Of course, it was hard, but we have no doubt that when the new weapons will be fully equipped, we will make up for all the mistakes. Meanwhile, the enemy was desperately building their ships. Although their ships were ancient and backward, their numbers were far greater than ours. And then on the battlefield, the number of enemy ships is often several times greater than ours, leading to confusion and errors in targeting automatic weapons, making our loss greater. In addition, while our main ships are busy engaging, the enemy launches raids on less defensible planets. As a result, our 5 planets have been taken over. Enemy forces are only 50 light-years away from our base. Numerous mutual accusations emerged from subsequent military conferences. Commander of the fleet, Admiral Taxaris, claimed we shouldn't blindly trust in the almighty weapon and should continue to build ordinary types of ships to maintain the advantage. But Norden says there are ways to turn the situation around in the shortest possible time. Norden claims he has another weapon. The battle analyzer developed by his scientists is beginning to take shape. Mathematicians have analyzed some typical examples of warfare in history. The results show that even when we are victorious, the combat power of our ship is not even half of the theoretical value. The battle analyzer allows full combat effectiveness of the fleet. Just replace the commander in combat with a supercomputer. The program was initially controversial, but after a number of war exercises, we were all convinced. That's when the trouble started again. The battle analyzer contains hundreds of millions of electronic components. This requires a large number of technicians to maintain and use it. Combat ships cannot accommodate so many people. We had to build auxiliary ships for this purpose again. Finally, we had to temporarily use 2 analyzers in the battlefield, but the enemy was always stepping up their attacks and their morale was growing. The fleet's expedition was at first very successful. The enemy suffered a heavy blow in the first engagement. They retreated and we retook 3 planets. But the enemy have noticed our tactics are changing, and inexplicable auxiliary ships are present in the fleet. In the second engagement, the enemy used their numerical advantage and focused fire on the ship with the analyzer in a suicide attack. Despite their heavy losses, they achieved the desired goal. Our fleet was left without a leader and had to retreat once again. Not only did we surrender our newly recovered territories, but we also lost several other planets. This time Grand Admiral Taxaris committed suicide in anger to express his protest against Norden. And I assumed the position as Supreme Command. Later, I called a number of military meetings. Norden was criticized by everyone at the meeting, but he's still making the case for science. And we can no longer retreat now, but continue to rely on new and more powerful weapons. We've already learned from 2 failures, we don't want to repeat them. No doubt, the scientists under Norden can certainly produce more advanced weapons. We trusted him one last time, and we were wrong again. The last weapon is called the exponential field. Experts' explanations claim that the exponential field can produce a special kind of pseudo-space and make the finite distance in ordinary space grow rapidly into infinite distance in the pseudo-space. In combat, simply predict the enemy's position in advance to determine the course and distance in order to intercept them, then set the timing switch according to the calculation result. Theoretically, when the exponential field is turned off, our ship will suddenly jump into the middle of the enemy and can make a surprise attack, or turn on the field for evacuation if necessary. We conducted several simulated attacks to prove that the device works very well. At this time, the enemy was planning an attack on the fortress planet. Our fleet had to rush into battle. Soon the enemy discovered that we had mastered some secret art of stealth. It is amazing that our warships would suddenly disappear or appear to deliver devastating attacks on them. But the victory is temporary. Something confusing has happened. That time I went into battle myself, assigned attack targets to each warship. The officer, after measuring the distance with extreme precision, we operated the exponential field. The results were surprising. We appear in ordinary space miles away from the enemy. When we find the enemy, they also find us. So we had to retreat and try again. This time it is still a distance from them. We even let them find us first. Obviously, there must be some serious malfunction here. I'm going to communicate with the other ships in the fleet. The result is like a stone sinking into the sea. It's too late, even if we figure out why. It turns out that the exponential field generator distorts space within a certain radius, resulting in increased error in distance from the actual space in the pseudo-space. We thought everything would be back to normal when the generator was turned off. But the fact is that it is impossible to return to the original state of space. Repeated switching of the exponential field generator is equivalent to stretching and shortening the ship at times. The original state of all objects on the ship is unrecoverable. All kinds of distortions and asymmetries accumulate and the instruments all become deviated. The subsequent consequences were unbelievably chaotic. It is indescribable that all the ships are unable to communicate and all the ranging equipment has gone wrong. After that, more than 1,000 enemy ships launched an onslaught against us. We had to struggle until we were destroyed or surrendered. The permanent deformation to our ships is increasing. It wasn't long before most of our combat ships self-destructed. This is the beginning and end of our defeat. The above is our real record. I did not make any exaggerations or misrepresentations, and I definitely did not try to gain the sympathy of the Supreme Court judges. My statement is purely to refute the slander against the officers under my command. I also intend to find out who is really responsible for our failure. Finally, I ask that my statement be seen as an extremely sincere request. Although I am currently confined to a double cell, I don't complain about the conditions and facilities. However, I solemnly declare that I cannot be held responsible for my future actions if I am celled any longer with Professor Norden, the hideous chief of the research staff of my armed forces.